$1 million idea is great. Well, as long as you don't have it at the wrong time. Hey guys, I'm Stype and this is top 7 innovative cars that came out way too early and then flopped. Let's go. GM EV1. Looking at the whole EV revolution that's happening right now and how it's made Tesla the most valuable car company in the world by far, it really makes you think, why couldn't GM do the same? They had an all-electric EV1 way earlier. So why? The official answer is because of the battery tech. If you think that 220 miles in an hour or more to recharge modern lithium-ion batteries will give you range anxiety, think how anxious you'd be if the most you can get is just 80 miles out of lead acids and then wait 3 or 15 hours to get it going again. That's how bad it was some 30 years ago, and that's with every trick GM pulled to extend its range as much as possible. Tricks like super narrow tires, lazy throttle response, 80-mile-per-hour top speed limiter, and the most aerodynamic body ever. So no, it wasn't a cross-country kind of car, well, unless that country was the Vatican, but it was still perfect for the daily commute, and the number of people wanting one far exceeded the amount that was produced. Sadly, GM thought that the battery tech wasn't advancing enough and decided to pull the plug on their electric car program. What doesn't make sense is, why did they have to destroy them all? It's almost as if big oil lobby wanted it gone, mafia style. But that's the topic for another video. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Chrysler Airflow. Having a slippery body isn't just beneficial for range-anxious electric vehicles, it also improves the MPG of the regular cars too. That was one of the selling points of the first streamlined car ever, the 1934 Chrysler Airflow, which, after the Great Depression just ended, was actually a huge selling point. Turns out, if you streamline a car, close all the holes, smooth out the edges, and generally make it more aerodynamic, you'll need less fuel to travel the same distance, which in turn means more bucks saved in your pocket. However, the public just wasn't ready for a car that looked so radically different than everything else. It was so unconventional, so odd, so placenta-shaped that many people thought it was just plain ugly. So okay, they needed a bit more convincing, I guess. How about if the Airflow managed to set a top speed record? No? What if Chrysler demonstrated that their car is more fuel efficient going in reverse than other cars going forward? Still no? Okay, safety. Everybody likes safety, right? The streamlined unibody construction isn't just slippery, it was also much stronger too, as was demonstrated in this pushing a car off of cliff stunt. But the public just didn't want to budge. The Airflow was considered too ugly and no amount of out-of-the-box marketing and money-saving calculations would change their mind. Meanwhile, at Chrysler,
some people are really fucking stupid.
But in all seriousness, would you buy the best car ever if it was too ugly? Comment below. Jaguar XJ220. In 1988, Jaguar was flying high. They were dominating at Le Mans. They were developing the fastest car in the world, and 1,400 millionaires were throwing deposits at it as if it was a ticket to Epstein's Island itself. And it's easy to see why. The so-called XJ220 concept had the same V12 as a Le Mans racer, albeit slightly detuned, a top speed of 220 miles an hour, all-wheel drive, scissor doors, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. But then, while the car was still being worked on, the shit hit the fan. The emissions standards became stricter, the economy went into a recession, and most of those millionaire buyers simply chickened out. Things were dire, so Jag started cutting corners. Rear-wheel drive only, regular doors, lots of parts borrowed from other cars, and a much smaller twin-turbo V6 instead. Mind you, that V6 came out of a Group B rally car, and in the production XJ, it developed even more power than the initial V12, while also being kinder to the environment. It was the earliest case of downsizing, and it set the template for all modern hypercars of today. If you want speed, turbos are a must. And while the XJ220 didn't quite live up to its name, 217 miles per hour was still a world record, and the few buyers that did go through with it ended up with the greatest road car ever made. Well, just for a couple of months until the McLaren F1 came out and completely overshadowed it. AMC Eagle. You've heard the story, 1970s, blah blah blah, oil embargo, blah blah, death of big thirsty engines, blah. Not only did this mark the end of the muscle car era, but it made it much harder to live with another popular type of vehicle, an SUV. The answer to the situation couldn't be clearer. What the market needed was something as practical and as rugged as the Suburban, but no more expensive than a regular saloon. What the market needed was an AMC Eagle, a tall riding unibody of a Concorde with the four-wheel drive tech from Jeep. It was the first crossover ever, a real jack of all trades, but for some reason, 40 years ago, that wasn't such a big deal as it is today. Why not? Well, as my father would say, the older generations weren't as dumb as us millennials are today. Nobody cared about going off-road once every 3 years. Practicality was the main selling point of the SUVs. And when Chrysler introduced the Voyager minivan, there wasn't much need for the Eagle anymore. Mind you, that was also before SUVs were marketed as being safer than regular cars, which they aren't. In short, the Eagle failed because people weren't dumb enough. Yet. Cadillac V8 6.4 models. In 1981, Cadillac introduced the so-called V8 6.4 engine. It was the first ever mass-produced engine with variable displacement. It's just a fancy word for cylinder deactivation, and it works like this. You have a big old 6-liter V8 firing on all cylinders when you need more power. But when you're at cruising speed, the ECU would deactivate some, making it a 4.5-liter V6 or even a 3-liter V4. This saves fuel without sacrificing any power, so I can totally understand why Cadillac went all in and made this engine the only one available across the entire 81 range. Sadly, it worked about as well as Bill O'Reilly's teleprompter.
Fucking thing sucks!
The ever-changing additions were just too much for the Caddy's microprocessor. It would react too late, and at some speeds, it would get confused about how many cylinders should be active, switching between 4, 6, or 8 way too often.
I just switched.
Apparently, the so-called EEPROM chip would do 300,000 calculations per second, but given how much trouble it had matching the speed and your throttle position to a number of cylinders, makes me seriously doubt that.
Liar!
As a result, these 81 Cadillac land yachts sounded broken most of the time, felt too jerky and not elegant at all. No wonder the engine was discontinued after just 1 year. Look, the idea was amazing, and these days it's found in anything from V12s to straight 3s, but 40 years ago, the EEPROM abacus just wasn't ready for it. Aston Martin, Lagonda. The year is 1970, or thereabout, and Aston Martin is short on cash. Again, solution? Let's try a four-door saloon with a super high price, odd looks, and futuristic tech instead. It's called the Lagonda, and I won't waste many words on its divisive design. That's a topic for another video. But what I will say is this striking-looking body was bent and hammered into shape entirely by hand. Forget about robotics or even Ford's assembly line. This was the kind of production that was used in the 1800s, BC. And then those same artisan guys thought they could actually pull off producing the most computerized, most advanced, most futuristic car ever.
I mean, how hard can it be?
Just look at the interior. Buttons here, there, literally everywhere. And the worst part, they were touch-sensitive buttons in the 70s. They suck major dick even today. So can you even imagine just how bad those old ones were? So bad, in fact, that they were replaced with regular ones just a year later. But wait, there's more. Lagonda was also the first car to have a digital dashboard with screens instead of analog dials. That too didn't really work well. Not when it used LCD technology, or later the CTR, nor finally the vacuum fluorescence. The thing is, you can't just take whatever new piece of tech just emerged and put it in a car expecting it to work. It takes a lot of time and money to develop electronics like this properly, and when you don't have either, that's when you end up with more bugs than an average Bethesda game.
It just works.
Anyway, it's time for some honorable mentions. Let's see if you can guess them. And at number 1, here we go. Megatrack. XM is a long-running French manufacturer of tiny quadricycles that kids as young as 15 can drive without a license. Cool toys, but not nearly as cool as what they once made in 1992. The absolute ginormous off-road supercar called Megatrack. It dwarfs regular supercars, and with its suspension set to its highest setting, the Mega towers above the Cayenne too. Now, considering how popular super SUVs and off-road supercars are today, you'd think that the Frenchies had struck gold with this one some 40 years ago, but now Never mind that it had a Mercedes V12 in the back, the same one as in the Zonda, and a 4-seater interior that's more spacious than an average New York apartment. The buyers were simply put off by its equally ginormous price too. $300,000 or $650K in today's money doesn't sound like much next to a multi-million-dollar Bugatti, but back then, even the highest-end hypercars like the 959 or the aforementioned XJ220 were considerably cheaper. Keep in mind that '92 was also a recession year, so they managed to sell only 5 or 6. Some say even 12. Either way, a kid from Chernobyl could count them using dactylonomy. That's finger counting for those of you who don't know. Meanwhile, the 911 Dakar and Huracan Sterrato were sold out before they were even announced. Oh well, right idea at the wrong time. Anyway, that's all I've got about this topic. Go watch something else, and I'll see you in the next one. Cut!